The skill we're going to work on in this video is solving equations that are multi-step. They have more than one step. The last video was just single step equations. So we have a couple of things that we need to do, a few different steps you need to follow when you are solving an equation that has more than just that one step that we needed in our last video. Our equation is 8x minus 6x minus 35 equals negative 25. So a few things about this equation. When I look at this, I notice that the only variables that I have are x. They're the same. So I've got an 8x and I've got a negative 6x. And then I also notice I've got what we call constants. I've got a negative 35 and a negative 25. A constant is what we think of as a number by itself. There's no variable with it. So negative 35 is a constant, negative 25 is a constant. Some things that you need to know are these numbers that are on the same side of the equation, if they are like terms, they can be simplified pretty easily. So if you look at this, if they're already on the same side of the equation, the 8x minus 6x, that can be just simplified as 8x minus 6x, which will simplify down to 2x. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. Because they're on the same side of the equation already, you can just crunch those together and simplify them. You cannot do that with these because they are not like terms. This is a variable term, this is a constant. You cannot put them together because they are not like terms. So what we are going to do, the steps we're going to follow over here are identify the variable terms. When I look at this, 8x, that has an x in it, has a variable in it, so I'm going to put a box around that because that is a variable term. Negative 6x, I'm also going to put a box around that because it's also a variable term. Now you'll notice with this negative 6x, I didn't just box the 6x. I boxed the negative sign with it. So I know for purposes later that that negative goes with that 6x. It's a minus 6x or a negative 6x. Now I go to my next term, which is minus 35. That is a constant. It does not have a variable with it, so I am going to circle my negative 35. That's a constant. Equals, and then I have one more constant over here. I have negative 25. And again, I'm keeping that sign that's immediately to the left of the 35 with the 35, that sign that's immediately to the left of the 25 with it. So I've identified my variable terms. The next thing that I want to do is identify, actually I identified my constants also. I want to simplify my variable terms now. And that's what I talked about a minute ago. We identified the variable terms, we identified the constants by giving them different shapes, and now we're going to simplify the variable terms. So because I'm working with only the left side at first, I'm going to look at my left side. I have two like terms. I have an 8x and a negative 6x. Because they're like terms, already on the same side of the equal sign, I can simplify them, meaning I can say 8x minus 6x. Well, that simplifies down to 2x. Okay, so I'm going to box that because that's still a variable term, and I still now have my minus 35 equals, and I'm going to circle that, my minus 25. Now, what I remember from the last video is that I can't just simplify these two because they're not on the same side of the equal sign. Negative 35 is on the left, negative 25 is on the right. What I do want to do is focus on getting this x by itself. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do, just like with a single step equation, is isolate this variable. I want x by itself. So if I look at all of this stuff here, the last term that I want to work with is the term that has x in. So once you get things simplified so that your variable terms are combined into one term like this, the last term you want to work with is that variable term. You want to take care of everything else first before you work with that variable term. So we've got 2x minus 35. We want to undo all the stuff that's done to x. So we know we work with this last, so I'm going to move on to this minus 35. I know from the last video that minus 35 has an inverse operation of plus 35. So I'm going to add 35 to get rid of this subtraction. So minus 35 plus 35 is 0. And remember, whatever I do on the left, I have to do the exact same thing on the right. So now I'm going to add 35 on the right. Since I added 35 on the left, I'll do it on the right. And I'm left with negative 25 plus 35. These are like terms, so I can simplify this minus 25 plus 35 to be 10. So, and I'm looking back up here to make sure that I did everything correctly here. So what I have on this side is 10, and what I still have left over here on the left, this is gone, but I still have my 2x. Now, if you look at this, you might realize that what we're looking at now is a single step equation, just like we dealt with in the last video. So all of this was just simplifying this to get it down to the point of a single step equation. So we have identified our variable terms, we identified our constants, we simplified our variable terms, and we've simplified our constants. Now we're working on the final step of the inverse operations. We did a little bit of inverse operations around here as well, but we're working on this final inverse operation step. 2 times x equals 10. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide this by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times x is x. So this cancels out. But whatever I do on the left side, I have to do exactly the same thing on the right side of the equal sign. So I have to divide the 10 by 2. And I end up with x equals 5. I have isolated my variable using inverse operations, and I end up with x equals 5, and we have solved a multi-step equation.